For additional context, I was embarking on an incredibly important and logistically complex journey with my child, making our way from the United States back to our home country. This was far from a typical flight. It entailed a demanding 8-hour journey through multiple time zones, with several carefully coordinated connections strategically planned along the route. After thorough consideration of the journey's duration and intricate nature, combined with the desire to ensure maximum comfort and minimal stress for both myself and my child, I had deliberately made the decision to invest in first-class accommodations for our travel. The airline at the time was operating under particularly stringent COVID-19 health and safety protocols, which resulted in our boarding group being specifically designated as the final group to enter the aircraft, in accordance with their carefully structured boarding procedure. When we finally reached the point of boarding the aircraft, we were confronted with an entirely unexpected and rather frustrating situation. Occupying our designated first-class seats was a woman who appeared to be somewhere in her mid-40s, accompanied by her child. With the utmost courtesy and professionalism, I approached her and proceeded to explain our situation in detail, showing her our boarding passes, but she responded with complete and deliberate indifference, steadfastly refusing to even acknowledge my presence. Given our challenging position as members of the final boarding group, coupled with a rapidly diminishing time before our scheduled departure, I found myself reluctantly compelled to seek the intervention of a flight attendant to resolve this increasingly awkward situation. Upon the arrival of the flight attendant at our row, the woman immediately adopted an interesting strategy. She began repeatedly declaring lo siento, no entiendo in Spanish, a phrase that translates to "I'm sorry, I don't understand" in English. The flight attendant, displaying admirable professionalism and linguistic versatility, proceeded to explain the entire situation in perfectly fluent Spanish. However, as this interaction progressed, it became increasingly and unmistakably clear that Spanish was not, in fact, the woman's native language. She was simply employing this linguistic deception as a calculated delaying tactic to avoid addressing the situation directly. Here's where the situation took a particularly fascinating and unexpected turn. As fortune would have it, I happened to be completely fluent in Spanish, having studied and used the language extensively throughout my life. With a knowing smile playing across my face, I addressed her directly in impeccable Spanish, firmly but politely explaining the necessity for her to relocate to her properly assigned seats. The effect of this revelation was instantaneous and dramatic. Her face immediately flushed a deep shade of crimson, and she launched into an impassioned and extensive tirade, maintaining her commitment to Spanish, naturally, centered around her status as a single mother and making elaborate arguments about the proper respect that should be accorded to one's elders. She then proceeded to make the rather presumptuous suggestion that I should voluntarily relocate myself and my brother, who was in fact my son, to the economy class seats, apparently operating under the misguided belief that her circumstances somehow entitled her to our first-class accommodations. In response to this rather presumptuous outburst, I maintained my composure and calmly but firmly pointed out that, at the age of 27, I could hardly be considered significantly her junior, she being merely in her 40s. And furthermore, I explained that her status as a single mother, while certainly respectable, carried no particular weight or special privileges in this specific situation, especially considering that I, too, was a single parent who had actually taken the time and made the financial investment to properly purchase and secure these specific first-class seats for our journey. The situation continued to evolve in an increasingly theatrical manner, with me finding myself unexpectedly cast in the role of an impromptu translator while the visibly exasperated and increasingly stern flight attendant carefully but firmly explained to the woman that she had two clear options: either return to her properly assigned seats immediately or face the very real possibility of being removed from the aircraft altogether, a consequence that would undoubtedly be far more inconvenient than simply accepting her designated seating arrangement. Finally, after what seemed like an interminable standoff, she did ultimately retreat to her assigned seats in economy class, though not without delivering one final, particularly tasteless parting shot, abruptly abandoning her affected Spanish persona to mutter discriminatory comments in perfect English about how my kind had supposedly contributed to the deterioration of the United States. In response to this final display of prejudice, I simply offered a good-natured laugh and pleasantly suggested she make herself comfortable in her proper seats, choosing to rise above the unnecessary hostility of the situation.